Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Anthem. And the reason we're going to be talking about Anthem today is because they released like 20 minutes of gameplay that I actually got to watch. And since I watched that gameplay, I figured, you know what, let's do a little bit more research. Let's dig into Anthem a little bit more, see some interviews so that I can give you guys all of the information that is currently available in regards to this game, as well as my opinions as to most of that information. So let's not waste any time and get right into the intro. And by intro, I just want to give you guys a very basic notion of what Anthem is, just in the event that you've been, boycotting it because it's EA. If that's the case, I'm just going to give you the very basic notions of what this game is about. Now, this is a 4-player co-op MMO light. In a way, it reminds me of a third-person Destiny, except instead of controlling Guardians, you're going to be controlling freelancers, and these freelancers are going to have access to Javelins, which are essentially these mech-looking things, and they're kind of like your exosuits that you will be using to venture out into the world and fight against foes, which in a way reminds me a whole lot of Warframe, where you control Tenno and then you have Warframes. It's kind of like a very similar concept there. So now that you know what the game is about, the next thing that is going to come into your mind is, okay, Rurikhan, so why should I care? Or what I like to call, what are the main innovation points in this game? And bear in mind, I use the term main innovation very loosely. I would say that these are kind of like the defining characteristics that set this a little bit apart from all the other MMO lights out there. And the very first one has to be the map verticality. You're going to have maps that are incredibly vertical because your characters can fly with the use of these Javelin exosuits. Now, there's limits to how much you can fly because your jets will eventually overheat, so you can fly downwards in order to cool down your jets, or you can fly through waterfalls and stuff like that, and you will be able to cool down your jets, which will then enable you to keep flying upwards. So there is a mechanic around the flying systems. Now, I don't know how nice that is going to feel because I would actually have to get my hands on a game to really feel out if the flight system feels good, because whenever you put flying into a video game, something that I've noticed is that it needs to be done really, really well. Otherwise, you risk the risk that you get is that it gets either boring, overpowered, or there's a number of things that can go wrong from my personal experience in games that involve flight. So it looks to me so far from the gameplay mechanics and stuff that I've seen, it looks like it's interesting, and that is one of the better things about it. Another one of the innovations in this game, and again, innovation being used very loosely, is that you can actually explore underwater. And the good part about this is that, in most games, whenever they put your character underwater, it's like you're moving through molasses. Everything is slower, shit gets blurry. Usually games get boring whenever you go underwater. But the fact that your character is basically in an exosuit and essentially flying is not that different from swimming, you can use the boosters on your exosuit in order to navigate through the water. So that might be all right. I haven't really seen them actually take shots inside the water. I don't know if there's going to be underwater combat. I haven't looked enough footage to see that, but it doesn't look like it's going to be terrible. Let's put it like that. The other thing is that you will obviously be able to do damage combos with other players. That is something that has been featured prominently within the gameplay that they've shown so far. And there will be a single-player narrative story in the main hub. This is BioWare at the end of the day. So, people are expecting a story, but I'm going to get into more detail about that story later down the line and the stuff that we know about that story up until this point. And then the other main and final innovation in this game is that it's got shiny visuals, animations, and sexy explosions, which, it's to be expected. It's probably going to be one of the main draws to this game, is going to be the fact that it's going to be in an updated engine, so to speak. I mean, it's not really updated. It's Frostbite at the end of the day, but, it looks good. The art style looks sexy. The animations look good. The explosions look good. The combos, all that stuff. It's the visuals, okay? The visuals look great. Whether or not they're going to look as good as this in the final version of the game, and depending on the platform that you are playing, remains to be seen, but right now, now the game definitely looks good, and that is definitely one of the main selling points. Now, before we actually get on to talking about gameplay, I figured that a lot of you guys are like, Rurikhan, this is EA, like, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to dick us over with something just like they did with Battlefront 2. I can already hear you guys saying that. So I figured that the very first thing that we're going to be touching on is what we know so far about microtransactions. Now, these are actually direct quotes that I have taken from their website. They have like an AMA that they did from Reddit or something, and it's just straight up in their website, and these are direct quotes. So what I'm telling you is what is written on their website. And if you're watching this video like a year from now and you feel like you got completely cheated out of your money because you watched my video, and then it's like, Rurikhan, this is nothing like you said, this is what was written on their website today. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I'm covering my own ass here. Anyways, what they said is, we will have purchasable vanity, but you will see what you get before you buy. No loot boxes, no pay for power, and you can also earn your vanity items. Then they go into a little bit more detail and they say another big question was around microtransactions in Anthem. The only microtransactions that will be available at launch. And this is the big problem that I have right here. Look at what this sentence says. The only microtransactions that will be available at launch are cosmetic personalization options. So by adding that little, you see, this is why EA, if you are watching this video, this is why people don't trust you, because you put sentences like this and then people will instantly tear this shit apart. Only microtransactions that will be available at launch are cosmetic personalization options, and you'll know exactly what you are getting. All upgrades that affect your gameplay will be earned by in-game progression, and you'll also be able to get personalization options through progression as well. Now, a couple of things that I have a problem with in this sentence. You guys probably already figured it out. The fact that it says at launch. So basically this gives them an out if they decide to later down the line be like, hey, we're making, we're selling weapons or something like that. Which, again, it's bad. Why did you have to type that in there? Like, maybe it's not even in your plans to do it. I don't know if it is or not, but the fact that you felt the need to get into this level of detail and say, these are the things that will be available at launch. It's like, does that mean that after launch you're going to change that? Because, I mean, 1 day after launch constitutes after launch. 1 month after launch. 2 months after launch. Like, basically it can happen, and that is something that really, really just like instantly puts me on high alert. Anyway, you'll also be able to get personalization options through progression as well. The other thing is no season pass, and we will have content after launch. That's right, the evolving world will not be locked behind a season pass. You and your friends will get to share the new discoveries that arise together with no worry of someone being left on the wrong side of a content wall. So basically here they are specifically saying that whatever comes after in terms of DLC, content DLC, everyone will be able to experience it. So again, my main alert here on the microtransactions thing is the fact that they felt the need to single out that these things, the only microtransactions available at launch are going to be cosmetic personalization options, which gives them the option of eventually selling weapons like they were doing in Battlefront 2. Hopefully that will not be the case. Whether or not that is the case remains to be seen. Anyways, let's get on to talking about the story, because this being a BioWare game, naturally people are going to be very interested in story, and then we will talk about gameplay. The story is going to be experienced in interactions in Fort Tarsus and on the Strider. Now, I'd like to touch up on the Strider because unfortunately, I feel that the Strider already has a lot of wasted potential, and just in the unlikely event that anyone from EA sees this, maybe they'll get some suggestions. But the Strider, for those of you that do not know, if you've seen that gameplay demo that they've released today, the stuff that you're watching here, when the gameplay demo begins, you're on board the Strider. The Strider just looks like a really big, mechanical creature that roams through the thing. Through the world, and it's essentially your forward operating base. Now, in an interview that I saw between John Warren and Game Informer, he was specifically asked whether or not the Strider was customizable, and the answer was no. The Strider should definitely be customizable here. in my personal opinion, because it would be another thing that you could customize. It's your forward operating base. And not only it should be customizable, there should be a relevancy to where the Strider is, allowing you to, navigate the world a little bit more efficiently. Have like a spot that you could have your Strider in so that you could actually resupply in that spot. And then maybe you can organize with your squadron, because essentially this is going to be a 4-player co-op game. And then potentially you could have each player decide a strategic location to place their Strider in, so that all of the players could go through the map and, resupply at specific locations. I think that would be interesting. Not to mention, I think it would be interesting for players to be able to see my customized Strider. So that was just a bit of a sidetrack there in regards to the Strider. But the story interactions will be experienced in Fort Tarsus and the Strider, so that is where you're going to meet characters. That is where you're going to have certain dialogue options. But most of the gameplay itself, like where you're shooting and, actually engaging in taking down enemies and getting loot, is going to be on the shared world outside. So everything outside Fort Tarsus and the Strider is a shared world that you'll share with your friends or with complete strangers, depending on the people that you run into. But, whenever you get to Fort Tarsus and the Strider, that's just you. And I believe that most of the experience is going to be in first person. So you'll be navigating through the city and experiencing everything in first person. John Warren, once again, he said specifically that they don't want to pull you out of your character whenever you are having this single player experience. So most likely you're not going to have those cinematic camera angles that they've done in the past for Dragon Age and Mass Effect. They said there's going to be a bunch of really great characters because it's a BioWare game after all, but I'm just like, how are these characters going to become great in our eyes if they're not really taking part in the action? Because the action is going to be you with multiplayer friends or random strangers, whatever. That is the action. So how are these characters going to become great? How are you going to really bond with these characters? We don't know. That is something that I would very much like to know. But anyways, there will be a Cypher character, which apparently that will change. Your Cypher is kind of like your operator, so he's going to be the dude who's going to be telling you, giving you information about the stuff that you're doing, about the mission, all of that stuff. Supposedly, Fort Tarsus will change over time depending on what you do in-game, because supposedly you're going to have certain choices that you can do while you play the game. Even though it's like this is a thing that they're not going into great detail, which leads me to believe there's not going to be that many choices, and Tarsus is not going to change significantly. This is my personal belief, and I hope that I am proved wrong. I hope that Tarsus changes completely depending on the choices that you make throughout the game, but I don't think that is going to be the case. Now, another developer, I didn't note down who it was because I was watching this IGN thing, and there was just so many developers scrolling through. But one of those developers said specifically that in Fort Tarsus, you will form relationships with characters. Now, forming relationships apparently does not necessarily mean romances. So if you guys were hoping to get it on with an NPC or something, right now that is not in the plans. That could still change, but according to John Warren, right now that is not in the plans. Another thing that was mentioned from that same developer that said form relationships, he said that there will be consistency in choices and consequence in Tarsus. So that does mean that there are supposed to be choices and there will be consequences for the choices that you make while in Fort Tarsus. Now, in contrast, in the interview that John Warren gave to Game Informer, he specifically said that the dialogue options and the choices and all of that stuff is not going to be as complex as a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age game. It is going to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more simple. Your character will be voiced, which it leads me to basically this whole thing that I've been reading about the story and all the things that I'm seeing about this game is I think the story is going to be mostly linear. I hope that I am wrong because they're bringing up choices and consequences and, they're actually saying it is our world, but my story. So it's almost like I'm getting conflicting vibes off of every bit of information that I get about this game, basically, is what this is boiling down to. But essentially, in my opinion, I think the story is going to be mostly linear, and the bigger focus of this game is going to be on the gameplay itself. And speaking of the gameplay, let's actually go ahead and talk about it. So the gameplay is going to consist on you going out on expeditions with friends. Now, these expeditions are going to be a wide variety of activities. We actually get a glimpse of a map earlier in the demo where they show like a bunch of stuff that you can do. It reminded me a lot of Destiny, like I'm not gonna lie. You open up the map of Destiny and you put it side by side with that one, and sure, the art is going to look different, but ultimately, you know, the activities and the stuff that you're gonna be doing, I don't think is going to be terribly different from Destiny. And bear in mind, I'm not saying that as a negative thing. That is going to depend on the type of player that you are. More detail on that in a couple of seconds. But anyways, wide range of activities, and essentially the gameplay loop is going to be go out, kill a bunch of bad guys, get some loot, optimize your loadout into different builds, and then you can either choose to go back to Fort Tarsus, report your story experience, your single player story and progression, or your Strider, whatever. And then whenever you're done with that, you're gonna go out, kill some more dudes, get some more loot, and repeat, okay? And again, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, because ultimately one of my favorite games of all time, which came out this year, Monster Hunter World, is essentially this same gameplay loop, okay? Which is you go out, you hunt monsters, you collect bits from those monsters, you craft armor, craft weapons, then you go out and you hunt bigger monsters. It's kind of like, it's a very similar loop. That's why I'm, in a way, interested in this game. Now, when we're talking about killing bad guys and whatnot, most of the stuff felt extremely easy from what I've seen in the gameplay. I mean, they just roam through the world and destroy everything in just a couple of hits. However, the boss fight looked really cool, okay? The boss fight looked much cooler than pretty much anything else that they showed in the game. It reminded me a little bit of World of Warcraft boss fights because it had multi-stages, and then you would have the ads come in, and then the boss would go away, and then the boss would come back. You have to shoot the boss in the weak spots. You can still do the combos and stuff like that. And it just looked really cool from a gameplay perspective, as well as from all of the stuff that you could do in there. Beyond that, there will be emergent world events. So I'm thinking kind of like dynamic events that we've seen in Destiny. And you're going to see me compare this to Destiny a whole lot because the game feels like it's been very much inspired by Destiny. It's impossible to talk about this game and not talk about Destiny or Warframe or even Diablo 3. And because the developer himself brought up Diablo 3 in the interview, so it's a shooter looter, so to speak. But anyways, emergent world events in the gameplay, they show like this massive Titan that shows up, and they actually said that the group was not strong enough to fight that particular Titan. But essentially, their point is that this is going to be an ever-changing world. So say, for instance, if you go to a location and usually you find certain enemies in that location, they're saying that depending on the time of day that you go to that location, depending on whether it is day or night, depending on how the weather is, depending on events that might be running in the game, you're going to be seeing different enemies there. Maybe you will find different treasures there. Maybe you will find different resources there. But essentially, that's what they're saying. So every time that you go to a place, they want you to have like a different experience. That doesn't mean that the map itself is going to change, but the enemies you find, the encounters that you can have, and the things that can happen there are supposed to change, which is interesting to me. Now, we talked about Javelins at the start of this video. For those of you that do not know, there are currently 4 confirmed Javelins. There might be more announced before the game releases, and I think that there are going to be, because even though 4 Javelins is a nice number, from what I've seen in the interviews, I think that there will be more. That's just something that I'm inferring from a lot of the conversations that I've heard. Anyway, the current ones that are available are the Colossus. The Colossus is going to be like a tank-type Javelin, so he's going to be able to take a beating, and he's going to also be able to carry the heavier weapons. Then you got the Ranger. The Ranger is going to be like your all-rounder type of character. He's going to be able to take some damage. He's going to be able to deal some damage. He's going to be the average, so to speak. Then you got Storm. Storm is going to be your glass cannon, but one of the main properties that I've noticed is that Storm seems, most of the abilities of the Javelin Storm seem to be around elements, like we see very early on in the gameplay. When she shows up, she uses frost, then later down she uses lightning. I think at some point I saw her use fire, or maybe it was in another gameplay video. So yeah, Storm is going to be the Javelin that, you know, glass cannon, also mage type, element type character. And then there's the Interceptor, which they haven't really revealed a whole lot of information about up until this point. You can play whatever one of these you want. They will be unlocked as story progression. You're going to start with the Ranger. It is important to note that from a lore standpoint, these things are not like produced en masse. They are like fairly heirlooms that get passed down through multiple generations. So therefore, they're like important things that you need to like take care of and maintain. Everyone in your team can play the same one because you can actually give each of them very distinct play styles, even within the same Javelin class. At least that's what they're saying to us. So you'll be able to do a Colossus that is more about range than mortars and stuff like that, and then have another Colossus that is better at close range with flamethrowers and shotguns and whatever. But I think it's going to be more fun if each of you like focus on a different one. But you can change them up whenever you want. You're not locked into a specific javelin. However, they will level up separately from your pilot. So your pilot has its own progression path, and then the javelin has its own progression path. And yeah, there you go. Then you will have, like I said, you're going to have a bunch of loot, and certain weapons are going to be specific to certain javelins. Like, for instance, the multi-mortar on the Colossus. That is like a Colossus-only thing. You can't have that on other characters. Now, an interesting thing about this is that, once again, bringing up Destiny, you know how each character has like a special melee hit, and then a special ability that he can do, like a special grenade, and then you have your ultimate ability. Now, this game uses a very similar system like that. You have two abilities that are on a cooldown. You also have a melee hit, which is actually completely separate from those abilities, and then you have your ultimate ability. Now, the main difference here, this is from the mech that were shown, from the Javelin that we were shown. I'm not sure if all Javelins are going to work like this, but the Colossus that we were shown, he had an ability which was the multi-mortar shot. That was on a cooldown, but it was a weapon. So that means that you can equip a different weapon on there, and you're going to get a different special ability. Then you also had a, what was it, a railgun. That railgun, again, is also a very specific weapon. It is not just a special ability. And these two things are on a cooldown, very much the way that your melee strike and your grenade were on a cooldown in Destiny. And then your special ability was actually, it's almost like a portable nuclear bomb launcher or something, which was insane. They showed that during the boss fight. Looked really cool. I actually really like that weapon. But essentially, it seems to me like that is also a weapon that is interchangeable, and if you change it, you will actually get a different ability. So you can change the weapons, and these weapons will also have different rarities because of the type of loot. You'll be able to have like epic versions or rare versions or legendary versions. Like the one that they're using, the multi-mortar, is a legendary weapon. And speaking on the topic of weapons, on launch you will not have a melee-based javelin. All the javelins are ranged. Now you can have a more close quarters based javelin, like something with a flamethrower and stuff like that, but there will not be like something that can equip an axe and just go at it. It is intended as a shooter through and through. So at least on launch there will not be a melee javelin unless they change their plans. But right now it is not planned. Maybe after launch they might do something like that. Now, while we were talking about loot, it is important to mention that loot will need to be decoded. Oh my god. I can't wait, okay? This is the second that they said this, the second that I saw this information, I was like, oh fuck, why? Why would you do this? I hate that. I just legitimately hate that. I can't stand that mechanic anymore, because usually you pick up something and then you take it back to the dude, and dude decodes and he's like, oh yeah, this epic weapon that you got, turns out it's actually a piece of shit. And you're just like, oh, why? And it happens way too often. I hate that. I wish that it would just like, just drop a weapon and let me pick it up and equip it. It's not that, trust me, it is not that hard. I've seen it done on multiple video games. The weapon drops, I pick it up, and it's like, guess what? I pull the trigger, and it shoots. Isn't that amazing? So, not a huge fan of loot being decoded, but that's going to be a thing. I understand that maybe this is something that they're thinking, you want to be in a multiplayer environment, and you don't want to have those people that just like, stop everything. I need to change my loot right this second. I understand that might be the reason, but ultimately, it just brings too much RNG, such annoyance to the whole process. Oh, now go back, now do this and that. I just don't like that stuff. Apparently, whenever you are doing activities, you will be broadcasting to your whole friends list what you're doing. I'm assuming you'll be able to set some kind of privacy options for that, but essentially your friends will be able to join in dynamically. And also, level will not prevent you from grouping up with friends. In this particular gameplay, you have 3 level 30 characters and a level 1. Not sure how that's going to work out in the final game. Not sure how you can balance around that, specifically because there was a part where the level 1 Storm Javelin damn near one-shot a whole group of enemies that the level 30s couldn't one-shot. And I was just like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think there's going to be some issues with scaling there. Like, sure, allow for that, but I don't know. Make sure that you balance it properly is all I'm going to say at that. And then finally, the last thing that I have to say in terms of gameplay is that there is not going to be any PvP at launch. And I know that a lot of you guys enjoy PvP and you love PvP. Me personally, I don't really care that much about PvP. I'm more about cooperative, so I don't really care. But the reason that there's not going to be any PvP at launch is because that's going to make it very hard to balance all of the weapons appropriately for co-op, so they don't want to be balancing around that. They do say that they might consider it after launch, but to be completely honest, any hardcore PvPer will know that usually when a game is not developed with PvP in mind from the core aspect of it, it's never really going to become a PvP game, okay? At least that's my interpretation of it. Feel free to disagree and let me know in the comments. And finally, the last thing that we can talk about is customization and personalization. So you will be able to customize your Javelin. You'll also be able to customize your pilot. The customization on your pilot is not going to be as impressive because they want to focus most of the stuff into your Javelin. Apparently, you'll be able to paint your Javelin in all kinds of different color schemes, attach certain parts to it. As a matter of fact, John Warner said something which I was a little bit disappointed in, but apparently most of the Javelin attachments will be cosmetical and not necessarily stuff that actually adds stats onto your equipment, which means that despite the fact that when you look at this gameplay, at the very start of it, you can see that you have 2 Colossus Javelins there, and they look wildly different. That doesn't necessarily mean that from a stats standpoint, they're that different. Now, what does change, naturally, is their loadout of weapons. So I'm going to assume that most of the changes in your playstyle will be based around the skill set that you have on your pilot, the skill set that you have on your Javelin, and the weapons that you have equipped onto your Javelin. That is going to be the things that change it. And that also means that for all of you fashion hunters out there, you're going to enjoy it because you're going to be able to customize your thing however you want. Now, that just kind of takes us back to microtransactions. If that is going to be a thing, then it is important that they stick by with what Mark Dara said, and you can earn all personalization options in gameplay. That'd be good. I do think that all, you know, it's a little bit unfair. Like, not even Monster Hunter World is giving you all of the customization options. The fact that they're saying that you get some customization options, just make sure that they're not lame. You know, it's not like, oh yeah, you got the free ones, they suck. Like, so long as the ones that you get, you know, are on par with the stuff that you can buy, like, that's fine. You don't have to give us all the personalization options. What you do have to do is not make it pay to win like 6 months down the line. That's still my main concern. Anyways, what do you guys think about Anthem? Let me know in the comment section below. If you guys enjoy my videos, as per usual, subscribe, click the bell icon so that you actually get notifications for future videos. At this point, we will have 2 videos that you guys can go and check out. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, comments, feedback, comment section below. Peace out.